found favor in the eyes of the king, Kosher hadavar, and it's proper in the eyes of the king to say this to his people. So it really has nothing to do with food at all. And when we use the word kosher, as we'll see when we go through kashrus, there are many terms that we use that are really not used in their technical sense, but they're used in their sort of accepted sense in parlance. The word kosher is one. Okay, what is kosher and what is not? Basically, you can divide kashrus concerns into two categories: the source of the material and certain mixtures that must be avoided. Now, there are exceptions to all this. Okay, and we will go into many of the exceptions. But as a general concept, when you want to determine if something is kosher, it's kosher ingredients in, kosher product out. We don't much care what happens to it in the intervening time. Now, that presupposes that the equipment is also kosher. We'll talk about the reason for that in a moment. But if you have kosher ingredients, you're going to get a kosher product, except for the exceptions. What determines if something is kosher? Well, the Chumash tells us that all vegetables are inherently kosher, with the exception. Dairy, milk, animal. The real kashrus concerns are when you start getting into food derived from the animal kingdom, be it grasshoppers, be it fish, be it poultry, be it meat. Then you start getting into questions of how it has to be shechted, how does it have to be prepared, how do we know it's from an appropriate species. And if you stay below that, you stay in the plant and the mineral kingdom, everything is inherently kosher. So let's just start with the simplest. Let's start with the minerals. And you do deal with minerals. You deal with salt. All right, or the classic minerals, and salt is inherently kosher. And then you're going to ask me, if I tell you that salt is inherently kosher, why, when you go into the supermarket, do you see a big fat OU on the diamond crystal salt or on the Morton salt? What is going on over there? So first of all, let me just give you out a list of a table that from the book actually, that I once made up, explaining how these symbols, what they mean. And I'd like to go through it with you so that you can understand it, and then we can go from there. Mark, you, okay. First of all, when we talk about ingredients, we start out with a very basic assumption. They're ingredients that are inherently kosher. They're always kosher. They don't require a hashgacha, and if somebody puts a hashgacha on it, they don't really do anything. For example, flour. All right, now you can tell there are enrichments in flour, which is true, but flour is inherently kosher, sugar is inherently kosher, salt is inherently kosher, water is inherently kosher. Even though if you buy a bottle of Evian water or buy a bottle of Perrier, you'll see an OU on it, it's inherently kosher. Okay? We in the kashrus industry call these group 1 ingredients. And I'll tell you the definition of a group 1 ingredient. It's an ingredient that the world's food chemists have not yet figured out a way to make not kosher on a commercially viable basis. It's a complicated definition. What it means is, nobody in his right mind makes this with a kashrus concern. I can go anywhere in the world and I can assume this is kosher. These things do not require hashgacha. This is very much it applies when you're running a kitchen or you're making product. Sometimes you call up a distributor, you say distribute the salt, and it shows up and it doesn't have a hashgacha on it, and you're running against the deadline. What should you do? And the answer is you call the Rav Master should be able to tell you, you don't need a hashgacha. You shouldn't think that he's doing anything. He's not like closing his eyes. Well, he won't be makbid. The answer is he knows, or should know, that it doesn't really require a hashgacha at all. Why is there a hashgacha on there? Marketing. Companies want to advertise. In the United States, we've built up an industry, which we'll discuss in a moment, of the kosher industry. Companies, thank God, regard it as a marketing tool. And they're proud to indicate that a product has been certified as kosher and to display it. So why do they do this? Well, one is that people have this idea, they see a kosher symbol on something, it's a higher quality, it's purer, people are more careful with it. And companies believe that to be somewhat true, and therefore they want to mark products as kosher. They also don't want to be pestered by crazy people calling them up and saying, is your salt kosher, is your sugar kosher? And then they have to start explaining, well, we spoke to the rabbi, and the rabbi said, they say, please go to your fax machine, and watch, we'll send you a certificate, don't bother calling us again. So part of getting a hashgacha on these things is just v'hashikosim b'yolayis kulos b'nei Israel, is just get me putter from all these titles. Either way, it works out very nicely because we have been able to build up a kosher industry in the United States whereby if you go to the supermarket today, I think the number is 40%, and I think it's probably higher than that, 40% of the foods that are sold in the U.S., any U.S. supermarket today have some type of kosher certification. And if you subtract from that pork and the things that are obviously not kosher, you're probably 60, 80%. I mean, the Bass, Hellmann's mayonnaise, Heinz ketchup, even the Oreo cookies, which we'll talk about in a moment, they're all kosher. The Ritz crackers, whoever thought Ritz crackers would be kosher? They used to make them with chazer. And the answer is because the industry has changed for many reasons, and they try to get as many products as kosher. And anything that can, pretty much, anything that can be kosher probably is certified kosher today, even though the Oil just came out. Tootsie Rolls is now kosher, and Gatorade is now kosher. They probably were kosher before too. And the reason they were, most of them were kosher anyway, was because we worked out that the raw materials that go into products, we've ensured that they're kosher. And I will bet you, you're going to go out into the bakery, I don't know if you're going to go out and work in the bakery or go out into the bakery industry, if you ever get a job in a non-kosher certified bakery, one day, look at the ingredients, and I bet you'll get a handful that aren't kosher. All right, you might get some cheese. Hard cheese requires a hashgacha. But pretty much everything else is going to be kosher, whether you're supposedly a kosher bakery or not. That's just the way it is. Very few people today use lard, pig fat. They just don't do it. There are some companies, like, especially for the certain Spanish markets, they're stuck. They have to have their manteca. They have to have their lard bread. Fine. But aside from those companies, hardly anybody uses it anymore. And we really have made it very easy for things to be kosher. And this is not the case when you go into other parts of the world. Not because, let's say, a company doesn't want to be kosher, but the raw materials on which everything is based are not necessarily certified as kosher and do require a kosher certification.